Good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Derek Anderson. I am Clinic Director at the Muscle and Joint Clinic. We are an EDS-focused clinic, been involved with HSD and EDS for nearly the past decade. My goal today is to show you, both clinicians, how to use biometrics to help guide your patients through the course of EDS treatment more effectively, and for those of you with EDS or HSD to be able to, one, help yourself get through treatment with less pain and be able to feel better sooner, as well as maybe even share some information with your clinicians so that they can better understand what it is like to be on this journey that is EDS. So EDS and HSD, as many of us know, is very much an elephant of an issue. To all you zebras, yes, we will talk about zebras in a bit. But with the comorbidities that occur with EDS, what we often see is that the specialists, that we become very focused on our particular area of training. And we start to get so close into the elephant that we lose perspective on how to better help our patient, or in this particular case, to better recondition, or more appropriately recondition our patient and you. And so that we need to be able to back out and look at much more the macro view to better help you. What we often see here is that there really is a wide variety of information out there for EDS patients. And the research goes back 60 years connecting the vast array of issues that occur with EDS. When I say issues, I'm talking about the comorbidities of mast cell activation, of POTS, of common variable immunodeficiency, as well as the autoimmune issues like Hashimoto's that often occur with EDS. And here we have our diagram outlining how EDS very often, while at the center of all these comorbidities, it isn't just having a bendy body. EDS is more than just about having a bendy body. That it really is this elephant of an issue, and being able to best address what is most plaguing you. Whether is it that you are incredibly potsy, and so therefore are more challenged in doing exercises on certain days where you're very dizzy and very depleted, or is it your MCAS is particularly flared, and so doing therapies like taping, sometimes cupping, other modalities like shockwave therapy or EMTT might be contraindicated on certain days. So we will talk more about today on how you can better assess, how many spoons, how many resources you have for that day to be able to better rehabilitate your body. And what we see here in this diagram, and I know there's a fair amount going on in here, but let's start at the top, at the brain. Because what this shows us is that our bodies are very much a physical, emotional, and chemical systems that are completely intertwined. And so if we become stressed, what we see is that on the right side here, on your left side, your right side, that our stress hormones will become released. And this is through what is known as the HPA axis, or our fight or flight system. So we end up releasing stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, which in short bursts These are actually very healthy. They actually help to get us up and going and moving. What we see, though, in HSD and EDS is that these stress hormones very often are chronically elevated, which is very damaging to the body. And so how is it damaging? Well, then we get into the lower portion of the slide here, where we see skeletal muscle, which will become very much tightened due to the elevated stress hormones, as well as the gut. Both of these have been talked about in previous lectures this week. But bottom line, the skeletal muscle becomes very tight and inefficient because we have less blood flow and nutrient flow in, as well as we have less egress or less exit of the waste products like lactic acid and carbonic acid and these other things that start to tend to build up. At the gut level, what happens is that the stress hormones start to break down the gut lining. And Dr. Aziz talked about it yesterday, that this is called leaky gut syndrome, where we essentially start getting food and other, bacteria, viruses. We get things getting through the gut lining that really shouldn't be in there. And so what happens, we now put the body very much more into a fight or flight state. Well, the challenge is we were already in a bit of a fight or flight state because we were releasing our adrenaline and noradrenaline and norepinephrine, that is our stress hormones. So we now have tight muscle, which has become inefficient. That is stressful to the body because it's not supporting the joints like they're supposed to. And we have leaky gut syndrome, which also alerts the body that we are getting all sorts of invaders into our bloodstream. Now what's key here is that this sets off the mast cells. And when the mast cells are set off, we release histamine, is one of the products. Histamine is a very excitatory type neurotransmitter. Again, it ramps our body up. Again, in short bursts, histamine is a very good thing. It really helps our digestion. It has other functions. But when released chronically, it actually greatly increases the amount of pain that our bodies can perceive. So this all starts creating a loop where we are encouraging our body to be really ramped up. That is, we are becoming more and more efficient at being more into our fight or flight state. This then feeds back to the brain, which is going up your left-hand side of the diagram, that tells the brain, hey, boy, I've got invaders, I've got joints that, well, they're already hypermobile, but because the muscles are so tight and imbalanced, I can't stabilize the joints so well. We got these mast cells firing off inadvertently. Everything being fed back to the brain at that point is that we're in a very ramped up, very fight or flight sort of state, which when you're talking about conditioning the body, that is not a stable base for the body to start with. Again, here's some research to share. One, this is for providers if you're not yet familiar with these studies that really start to explain and show how interconnected the last diagram is. Again, for patients, for those of you who have EDS and HSD, it's really important to share these papers with your providers, in that this is how we as healthcare providers, this is how we communicate, is with papers. So dig in deep. When you read a paper and there are references at the bottom, which there usually are, you can always click and at least read the abstracts elsewhere in the web. But these are a few very insightful papers that show us how that last infographic really is all tied together from a scientific basis. What I've talked about here is that all these hormones are very excitatory. They very, very much ramp up our system. Now, there are a number of ways that we can measure in the body whether we're more in this fight or flight state or are we in a rest and relax state? We can look at pupillary diameter, we can look at blood pressure, we can look at things like gut transit time, or if you have gastroparesis, this is a more common term for you. Bottom line, there's a number of ways that we can look at whether we're in this fight or flight or rest and relax sort of state. What we have found in recent times, though, and there is a bevy of international research on this, is using heart rate variability. Now, it does have the word heart rate in there, but it's the variability that's key. Because what that is telling us is how quickly our heart rate can change on a second-by-second basis. The healthier body, that is the body that is in more of a rest and relax state, actually can vary itself quite a bit more. And when we're reconditioning a patient, this is vital. Because what this is telling you is how many spoons do you actually have that day, and really in that moment. So it becomes predictive. So you don't have to wait, after working out or trying some new exercise or some new activity of daily living. You don't have to wait a day or 2 or 3 to find out if your body is really going to adversely respond. By using HRV, you can start seeing in the moment, is this becoming really stressful for my body, in which case I'm taking too many spoons off the table too quickly, or am I very much in a safe zone at this point? What we start to run into is that with heart rate variability, it is readily accessible in a variety of forms these days. We can use a variety of, whether it's phones, smart watches, there are definitely wearable technologies that you can buy. But for most of us, it really boils down to you can get an app on your phone and start measuring how well you are stressing your body, which is good. We want a certain amount of stress. That is actually, I think the easiest way to envision this is going to the gym. And if we go to the gym and we work out the appropriate amount, that is not too little, where we don't really make any gains, or if we work out too much, it ends up really destroying the body by tearing muscles in non-hypermobiles. What we can see is that when we strain the body the appropriate amount, we know what the normative values are for heart rate variability. Now, what we have found at the Muscle and Joint Clinic is that these numbers need to be lowered a bit for hypermobiles, particularly for hypermobiles who are deconditioned. And that is where our research is focused the last year and a half, and we will continue to dive deeper into this and hopefully have a paper here in a year or so. But bottom line, we know with HRV, by adjusting the normal ranges down by about 30% for hypermobiles, that we can actually really then begin to work people out in a safe zone. We see it as our job when patients come in to figure out what their challenges are and to prioritize them. I mean, that really is what triaging is about, and giving patients, at the end of the day, a diagnosis. More importantly, it's giving you a course of treatment so you can understand where your treatment path is going to be. What we don't know, even with years of experience, in my case, I've been in practice 26 years, what we don't fully know is how quickly we can take patients through their course of care. But HRV really helps to change that. And so we can more quickly, more effectively, and with fewer flare-ups, recondition patients by utilizing HRV. Now, the flip side to this is that the body needs to recover. And the body recovers by resting. So we get most of our recovery at night, but there's also forms during the day by doing things like non-sleep deep rest, where just sitting down in a chair, closing your eyes, kind of mentally shutting the world out, taking 15 or 20 minutes of that. These are all tools that help our bodies to recover. That is, put more spoons back for the rest of the day so we don't go into spoon deficit. What we get into is that our bodies really are chemical, physical, and emotional beings. And as we saw from that infographic, which if I didn't cite it, that was from the Mast Cell Activation Society, is that these three systems are absolutely intertwined. And it's being able to work with a team, whether that's a single clinic or a clinic running point that is help guiding your care, or you assembling your team, either in person or online, being able to address the physical, chemical, and emotional aspects of being hypermobile so that you can better recondition the body. And by being able to break the areas where we are really winding our nervous systems up, is if we have a lot of pain, being able to get pain management. If it's that we're so physically deconditioned, is being able to adjust our workout programs so that they are appropriate for you at that point. And sometimes it's even to that day if you're really in spoon deficit and your HRV is low. But understanding that our systems are very, very entwined. Because what we know is that a jiggly body really creates a jiggly brain. And so by stabilizing the body, we start to stabilize the biochemistry, which then stabilizes our emotional structure, which then further helps us to be able to stabilize our physical structure. And I think for all of us who are doctors in the United States, we take the Hippocratic Oath. I believe this is international as well, but that we will first do no harm. And I think for all of you who have been down the path at all in the HSD and EDS journey, is that you have encountered providers that haven't acknowledged or really understood where you are, that your providers got too focused in on their part of the elephant. And so understanding that words can not only heal, and that as providers, our job is to first do no harm, but that words can also harm. And that by doing by finding the right team and being able to monitor your care as you go through your care by yourself or with your provider, that your body will respond more appropriately by measuring HRV. So I did talk a lot about elephants today, but in that, do know that elephants and zebras actually have a bond in nature. They are each other's protectors. And so while the challenge of EDS might very much be an elephant, that all you zebras actually have a close and dear friend in the elephant. So I want to thank you very much for having me up here today.